You're listening to the Labor Notes Podcast, our weekly show on rank and file news and organizing tactics. I'm Danielle Smith, an organizer at Labor Notes.
And I'm Natasha Laney-Ullman, a staff writer at Labor Notes. Have you ever opened a Google Doc to start writing an agenda and felt paralyzed by the volume of tasks you need to cover at a weekly contract action team meeting? Have you put off calling a coworker because you feel you just don't have it in you to do another one-on-one? Have you looked at your calendar in despair at the endless stream of discussions, debriefs, action items, and next steps? If so, strap in, union siblings, we're doing Burnout Discourse.
And we're going to do it without influencing you to order a bathtub tray or a Muji planner or a candle warmer or lamp, although we may or may not put in a good word for joining the AMCA list. But burnout is like most collective problems. It's usually solved best by collective solutions. And that's one of the themes running through the 2026 Labor Notes Conference at a time when workers are being hit from multiple directions and our political moment honestly feels pretty bleak at times.
To talk with us about burnout and what we can do about it, we have with us today Teamsters Local 804 organizer Anthony Rosario and Sarah Slichter from the Movement of Rank and File Educators, a reform caucus in the United Federation of Teachers, who is facilitating a panel on this topic at the conference. Welcome, Tony and Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Hi, everyone.
For a bit of context, there's a beautiful chapter in the new Labor Notes book, Keep Going, by our board member, Ellen David Friedman, that opens up with a quote on Tony's 30-year journey in the Teamsters Local 804, from starting as a UPS loading worker to becoming an organizer in the union.
It talks about Tony getting active in Local 804 around the time of the UPS Teamsters strike for 15 days in 1997, and then having to navigate the subsequent ouster of the Teamsters president Ron Carey after campaign finance issues, and having to deal with local officers using their positions in the union to enrich themselves and the many other trials that followed. Tony, how would you describe that journey? Were there moments that brought you to a stop? And how did you move past that? What and who brought you energy and nourishment when you felt you needed it?
Wow, those are some really amazing questions. First, I'd like to start. The journey feels like a roller coaster. I mean, literally, you are on highs and lows, you are going up, you are coming down real hard, and then there are those really nice turns and grooves that really get you into your feelings. So I can't describe it any better than this journey being a roller coaster ride. Starting off from me being young, many people don't know that I lost my dad at a very young age. I was about 17. And we all know that's that, right? The coming of age where you're from a young man becoming a man, right? Still a young man, but like your responsibilities are starting to become more, right? Yeah, that's 17 to 20, right? Where you're trying to figure it out. You're just getting out of high school. And my mom came over here from Puerto Rico. My father was like a New Yorican. He's also Puerto Rican, but he got over here really early. So kind of, we call it Loisaida, which is the Lower East Side. That's where he kind of grew up as a kid. And then he met my mom, who was from the Bronx. And, my mom had a couple skills, but a lot of them were like most traditional Puerto Rican women at the time. She took care of the home. And when he passed, she found herself using those skills for work, right? It was about taking care of old people, taking care of young kids, children, and also cleaning people's homes, which was, we're talking like the 92 is when my dad passed. So you got to figure those couple years were really tough on her because he had left behind a mortgage and she was trying with these little odd jobs to pay enough for a mortgage. Me, I got caught up in a bad way. I was actually doing things I shouldn't be doing in the streets because we are a product of our environment. And I did see kids on the corner hanging out in nice cars with all the pretty girls. And I'm like, whoa, I want to be like that dude, And I got caught up in doing some really stupid things that I'm not so proud of. I saw a friend of mine killed. That was pretty tough on me. I still think about it every day. It kind of changed the way I saw things, where I knew that if I continue down this path, I'm going to end up like my friend or in jail like some of my other friends. And that's when I was lucky enough in 94, which is 2 years later, after doing a few dumb things for a couple of years, getting a job at UPS part-time. And I was trying to do college a little bit. My dad didn't want me to go to school. He always said I was good at arguing, so I'd be a lawyer. But I tried to do that for him, but it just wasn't working out for me. Between school and work, I was really tired. And I was, at that point, I had kind of bowed out of school. I was about 14 credits shy of an associate's degree when I this huge strike happened at UPS. It was 1997, and 185,000 UPS workers went on what 15 days strike. 15 days is all it took. And I've never seen, again, you guys mentioned Ron Carey, he was the then president. Met him for the first time. It was really meeting him was eye-opening. He was like this leader when he walked into our building. He was from 804, first of all. And then not only that, he had won the huge election in 91. And you kept hearing about this group called Teamsters for Democratic Union, who were like the kind of the driving force behind getting him elected. I didn't know too much about it back then, but I did start paying attention to the union stuff after this because I didn't know much about TDU, but I did know that, Ron Carey got elected and there was work being put into it, and I just didn't know much about anything else. I was trying to figure it out. I was 23, I was still young. I was making enough money to help my mom. She was happy to be kicking me out of bed at 3 or 4 in the morning. But the great thing about that strike, what I learned about collective action, what I learned about what it takes, 185,000 workers hit the streets for 15 days. That's a power that I never experienced before, especially at a young age. And I knew at that point that, when we come together, we could accomplish so much. And at that point, I started really paying attention, and well, as you guys know, Ron Carey eventually, like you mentioned, Danielle, because of the illegal campaign contributions, it wasn't him. It was like some people that he had man in the store at the time. Ron Carey, I'm not trying to make excuses for the old man, but he got really old. Sometimes you start delegating the work and you put the wrong people in the wrong place, and things caught up to him. And it was like, his own people that kind of messed him up, and it was pretty sad. And it was with the help of that outside force, right? Because he did strike these corporations, right? He did piss off the president at the time, who I believe was Bill Clinton. And, they were angry. So they were looking for a way to get some payback, and they did, which is unfortunate. And this is why I call it a roller coaster, because I'm here I am, this young union guy who doesn't know much about the union, who's like, who's this local 804 people taking money out my check every month? Like, I don't like this. And then I go to like, whoa, look at this strike. Wow, this was amazing. Yeah, take my money. You can have it every month. I'm okay with it. Benefits? Yes. And then, then he gets, again, now the roller coaster's going back down. And it's like, man, why this guy, such a powerful leader? How could they take him down? This is horrible. Like, they have the power to do this. And then again, just the roller coaster ride. And then 20 years of Hoffa. And at the beginning, we're like, okay, I don't know much. So I'm like, Hoffa, he's the son of the great Jimmy. I've heard the stories. He's got to be, he literally ran on his name. I believe the slogan at the time was the Hoffa name has power or something like that. And I was like, okay, what do I know? And I know you guys are laughing, but this is like my life, okay? So, so when I see it's a roller coaster ride, it truly is. Like, and then, so Hoffa, right? First couple of years, we get like a contract that's like, eh. And and I don't know much. And then later on, I'm like, hold on a second, something's going on here. Why are we not like, I don't feel like we're fighting for as much as we could be. I could see the things. And then I start really paying attention. And here we are, man. Now I'm like 20 years in, like the time has just flown by. I have just been literally watching time go by, and it was really tough. And it was years of bad contracts, right? I think I went through about four, maybe or three really bad contracts. And I was really feeling disheartened. And this is now me entering close to my 40s. I'm a veteran. I have respect on the job. Workers know who I am. I start paying attention to what's going on. And I find out that the Teamsters Local 804, there's a group of people running against the old regime, and they're trying to make a difference. So I pay attention a little. There was a guy named Tim Sylvester, and he had, I think at the time, had won a term, and we were like behind him. And then there was a group backed by Hoffa, and there was a breakaway. And I don't want to go too deep into the woods, but they ended up taking just enough votes from the team that kind of broke up to let the Hoffa crew kind of jump in there. And that was like the worst 3 years that I experienced, and that's when I was like, I can't, and I talked to my mom about it. I'm like, Mom, I'm really going through some stuff at the job. Like, this is not fair. And she just said to me, one of those old sayings, like a closed mouth doesn't get fed, but in Spanish. And I was like, you know what? You're on to something here, lady. 79 years old. God bless her soul right now. And she won't never need anything for the rest of her life, I promise. But back then, she's like kicking me out of bed, getting me to go to work and giving me great advice. And I started paying attention again, like getting down to it. And this is when I started becoming the person that you guys kind of see today, where I started really using my voice, becoming vocal. I helped the group get elected. I was get out of work, man, really tired sometimes, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And I would go and take a train to the city and help these guys campaign. And it was the best thing that ever happened because now we're considered probably one of the strongest locals in the country. Teamsters Local 804, our president, Vincent Perone, has really done some great stuff. We endorsed Iran Mamdani in the campaign. Obviously we backed the right horse in that one. And he's doing great stuff for our unions. We just took Amazon on strike a few days ago. And I can promise you the police officers were very polite to us, which was a different experience from last year when we went on strike and I was arrested on the picket line and there was a huge confrontation between us. So, little by little, I've seen some of the changes we made. And again, that roller coaster ride, like I'm coasting right now. I'm enjoying the fruits of my labor and all the people that came behind me and all the work that we've done together and all the people that we've built around. And a lot of it, when you say, where am I getting that nourishment when I'm getting beat down and I'm hurting and I'm like, man, I'm in the shower and I'm letting that water run on me and I don't know what to do, and I'm just like feeling those emotions. It's about having that great support group. It's about those members of TDU that have always had my back and always believed in me, even when I didn't. It's about my mom who always, always believed in me no matter what. So I'm sorry. But, we do get beat down and the roller coaster is serious, and if I didn't have those people in my corner, I tell you guys, I wouldn't know how to, and I love that there's women on this call because people don't realize the power of women in this movement. They really don't, from a man who was raised by a very strong single mom, that lost her husband at a young age, I can tell you that people don't understand the power of women because I would not be the man I am today without my mom. And it's a little bit like a mama's boy, but I'm okay with that. And the people that I met through the advice and, the TDU members who were strong in our campaigns, who I could always like when I'm going through a rough patch and I'm dealing with like some of those real, some real turmoil sometimes, when we talk about burnout, people don't realize as organizers the amount of work and sacrifice that organizers put into this work because we believe in our hearts with this movement. How many times we take our hearts and our souls and we put it out there for it to be broken a lot of times, right? Because it's broken and we have to have the ability to continue to put our hearts out there because we can't allow a breakage to continue to dishearten us because then we would be nowhere in this movement if everybody who gets their heart broken just gave up. It hurts. And one of the parts in the book that they really emphasized really well was that moment that you're talking about and experienced me already, somebody who's been through the trenches, who's been through the hearts and breaks and the pains, who really built a connection with somebody at that building at Amazon. Me and this person were like, one, he's Puerto Rican. Two, he had done time. Three, we kind of made promises to one another. One, he was going to help me get back into shape because at the time I was like 200 something, 30 pounds, and I was really out of shape. I'm off the UPS truck. I'm organizing. I'm meeting workers where they're at, and we're eating pizza and Taco Bell and Dunkin' Donuts. And it's not a healthy lifestyle. So you got to try to be healthy. That I can tell you. Sometimes our breakdowns and what we're going through isn't just our spiritual and mental, it's also our physical, and we're not paying attention to it. I promise you, I didn't until I went to the doctor and I realized something was wrong. But yeah, those are the moments where you think that you're thinking about this person you built with this connection and you're on strike and he's right there. He's talking about one of your strong leaders, like he's got 20, 30 people that are going to walk this picket line with you. He's done everything. You've had all those conversations, all the training, all the storytelling. You guys have built a bond like you've never had before. There's no way this guy's going to turn on me. But no, he got flipped. He got flipped by management. They promised him a position. He took it. Little by little, you could see the change in him. I didn't see the signs. One of my younger organizers actually kind of did, but I was so blind to it because I have built such a strong relationship with him. I was completely blindsided when he crossed the picket line. It hurt me. Again, it was another heartbreaking moment. And this one was really deep. It was a deep wound. And I remember kind of like just like staring off and just needing some time. And one of my lead organizers couldn't really talk. Nobody could really talk to me. And the young organizer I'm talking about, a guy named Cody, he kind of like, he waited, he gave me a moment, and then he came over to me and kind of put his hand on my shoulder, which felt comforting right off the back. Even though I didn't really want to talk to anybody, but that little gesture of a hand just coming on your shoulder and you turn around, you don't know, and you see this young person that's kind of like somebody that you've been, mentoring, right? And he sees I'm kind of broken, and he just says just two lines, man, just like two sentences. And he's like, man, for every for every David they take from us, we'll build 10 more or we'll make 10 more or something along those lines. And holy crap, when I tell you that snapped me out of it right there. And it rang so true. And I'm like, look at this young guy, helping this old war horse who's like feeling pretty beat up right now. And I mean, I don't want to go too much longer because I know I want to hear from other people on this call, but just to kind of like the culmination of that roller coaster ride, just so people know, you can be an old war horse, an experienced organizer, and you'll still get your heart broken and feel it there in that moment, like somebody just plunged it into your soul. But again, that support system, that person that you may have mentored, that younger generation, or even an older mentor. Every time I'm going through something, I'll call either like a Ken Path from TDU or even a David Levine, who's the new director, someone from my organizing team. I have plenty of support. I have Liana Dalton, Randy Corrigan. I have Sean Martinez. I have a lot of great people. There's an organizer named Birdie down in the South. She's amazing. So many people that I can pull from that when I need it. And I think probably if I have to say the most important thing is that support system, because I would be nowhere. And of course, my 79-year-old mom, who no matter what, is always got something, you know what I mean, up her sleeve. And that's I'll leave it there. You guys can I'm gonna take a minute to
She sounds like a really special person.
She really is. She really, really is.
Sarah, you're planning to lead a workshop at the 2026 Labor Notes Conference coming in June about burnout and what we can do about it. It sounds like there are two themes in particular that run through this workshop. One, building connection over how we're all dealing with this pretty universal experience. And two, moving the idea forward that we can deal with it together by coming up with structural solutions. Let's try this the way you do in the workshop. We'll open up with one of your prompt questions. Tell us about a time when you were feeling really burnt out. What happened? What were some factors in your working conditions or your organizing conditions that contributed to that experience?
Before I tell the story, I just want to say thank you so much to Tony for sharing everything that you just shared and for your role in that workshop that we did at the last Labor Notes. Like, I'm going to share a story, and I feel like I can share the real story now because you are so real, and we have to be real about how this affects us. So I'm going to tell a story about a few years ago. I got elected as union rep at my school. And in UFT lingo, we call that chapter leader. But I got elected halfway through the school year, and the union gives you some support when you first start out as chapter leader, but the idea of making that work like collective and sustainable is not really part of that equation. So I was burning out from feeling like I had to carry all those responsibilities on my own. And plus, at the time, I was also on the steering committee of the Moore Caucus, and then there's also just being a full-time teacher. So I was really leaving it all out on the field every single day. And any teachers that listen to this podcast know you give it your all every day. And by the end of the school year, you go until the wheels fall off. And I'll never forget the last day of school that year. The school day ended, and I actually got on the ferry to go to the Rockaways. And it was like everything that I've been holding for that school year, all the stress, all the exhaustion, all the anxiety just came pouring out. And this is the part that's a little embarrassing, but I'm going to share it because we have to be real. I was weeping on this New York City ferry to the point where two people had to ask me if I was okay. Like, Thankfully, I was on the ferry to go spend the evening with three of my closest more comrades. And I like went into their arms when I got off the ferry, and shout out to my gals who I know are going to listen to this podcast. You know who you are. But like sometimes you don't know that you're burnt out until you find yourself bawling your eyes out on a ferry. And you have to be like, okay, like something has to change. How can I do this differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are based in New York City on this call, and we know that crying on some sort of New York City public transportation is like a rite of passage. And I think I almost imagine we've all had experiences crying about organizing we're doing on the subway or somewhere else.
I just want to vouch for crying on the train into the city for those of us who are a little further north.
Or so.
Yeah. So this one's for both of you. I feel like I see some, but I'm curious, like, what are some of the common threads you guys see in each other's stories, and even what you hear from others about why they're feeling burned out? Like, what are the issues and root causes that you often notice that lead us to that place?
Well, one thing I could tell you from listening to Sarah, and thank you, Sarah, for sharing, it's the emotion and the passion, right? It's who we are. And you know what? I don't believe in that, real men don't cry bullshit, I, if you think that I'm any weaker of a man because I've shed a few tears, then shame on you. You know what I mean? That's just silly. Or people say, girl, you're crying like a girl. What's wrong with a woman crying? You know what I mean? I've seen my mom cry multiple times, and it's because of the love and the passion in her heart. And that's why we do shed tears. It's because of the love and the passion and the emotion that we feel. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're not crying, then there's something wrong with you. You might be a bit of a sociopath. You might want to go check that out and, and go seek some therapy, because I feel like doing this kind of work, you are going to shed some tears, man. You just are. It's hard. It's hard work. Especially if you really do love what you're doing and you really love the people that you're trying to support and help. One thing about organizing when you go through the trainings that bothers me, some people look at it as a bit of a manipulation almost tactic. And I say to them, I know that what you're hearing and how you're training, it may seem that way to you, but can I ask you something? Do you genuinely care for the person that you're trying to organize? Because how are you manipulating them if you truly care to help this person change their life for the better? Because that doesn't sound like manipulation to me. It sounds like you really care for this person. And when you go up to them and you're trying to organize them, are you just shooting numbers at them? Are you just telling them, hey, have you met your targets? Have you spoke to this person? Are you asking them, how's your family? How's your son? I remember you telling me your son was about to graduate. How did it go? Was he magna cum laude or whatever it is? I can't even pronounce it because, as you know, I didn't go to school for that long. But, I ask about how's it going. I ask about, of their kid who's in sports. I know if they're having a child, and then I'll know to ask later on, how's the baby doing? Because we care genuinely for these people. I think that the commonality, I think it is that. I think it's the heart behind this. I feel like sometimes people forget and they get lost in the numbers of it all, which I know they're important because we are winning a game of numbers here. And it is our jobs as organizers to make sure we get to that majority. But I would be very disappointed if a worker was just focused on getting to majority and not caring about the journey along the way and the people he's meeting and the lives they're touching along the way. When I get a message from one of my organizers who found out that I just went through a little bit of a health scare, which is why I look a little thinner, the message they sent me, again, it brought me to tears in front of my wife. My wife is asking me why I'm in tears. And I read the message to her, and then she was in tears. And it's because this person cared so deeply for what I've done for them over the time that I've met them, that they decided that, to write me this beautiful, beautiful message. And I was so blown away. And it's messages like that again, when we're in those moments, like if I'm ever feeling down, I will go back to that message and I will read it. And I will say her name, Latrice Johnson. Thank you. I love you. And I always remember that message because and in the message she says, I don't know if people do these things or send you these messages or it helps you. And I said to her, yes, you have no idea how much. And, not that we're looking for any rewards or any pats on the back, but those are the things that kind of like, for me, that matter. We do this work and we are beaten up a lot of times. And when we get messages like that, or we got people that are in our corner, that we have that support system of people that just know that they believe in the work we're doing, it helps us keep going. I know the theme of this is all burnout, and I want people out there to understand that are listening to this how important it is to have that support group.
Absolutely. I mean, like, this is something that I'll talk about a little later, but the support system but the way that this work can just kind of like break you open emotionally, but in a way that's actually like good for your heart. And when you put all of that heart and all of that passion into it, and one thing I heard from Tony's story was like just how much time every day you're putting into it can be really exhausting. And so you need that support system, 100%.
Thanks, both. This is again for both of you. What are things you found especially helpful in getting through those low moments? And what does it look like to find structural, organizational solutions to reduce burnout? Are there things you found helpful in your organizations?
So I'm really lucky to be part of a caucus where we all the time are talking about this problem and trying to find solutions together. And so the summer after my big fairy cry, I got together with other members of the caucus and we talked about what it's like to be chapter leader and how can we actually support the chapter leaders in our caucus. And we decided to put on a series of workshops for each other. And for chapter leaders and school site organizers, we had like 3 or 4 workshops, all in person, about different aspects of that work, about navigating the contract and regulations, about grievance handling, but also how to organize so you're not handling all the work on your own. We talked about the emotional part too, how to navigate difficult dynamics with your coworkers and how to like become comfortable confronting your boss. We talked about all that hard stuff. And we had more experienced chapter leaders in the caucus share their experiences and lessons that they'd learned. And we also created a network of chapter leaders and other organizers who can reach out to each other constantly if we have questions or we're in a crisis or we just need a vent. And it's really helpful to have those kinds of networks and those times when you can share skills and knowledge with each other and build that into your organizing. And so the following year, after those workshops, I was able to be much more sustainable with what I was doing at the school and collectivize a lot more. And the chapter got a lot stronger and I was a lot less burned out because, we kept these support systems going. We have these spaces, sometimes they're monthly, sometimes they're all in the summer, but we're there for each other because the work is really hard.
Yeah, that definitely I'm gonna kind of echo some of that stuff. Again, the support system is probably one of the most important things. Having those organizations, I know the UFT has like more, those reform movements, those reform groups are really strong. I've always had TDU to lean on, thankfully, in some of my more of my UPS orientated years. Um, and a lot of times now, also working with a lot of the Democratic Socialists of America, which are doing a lot of great work. So I have a lot of outlets, thankfully. But one that Sarah mentioned that's like near and dear to me was we when we mentioned like the line that Cody had where for every one David we'll make 10 more. We decided to kind of put together like a curriculum where it's like a kind of like an 8-week organizing boot camp. And it brings me so much pleasure to see so many young workers involved in it that want to, one, be a part of it, some that are actually doing the facilitation. We put a lot of work into putting this organizing boot camp. It has a lot of political education mixed in with a lot of organizing, basic organizing, basics of organizing. And it's like, for example, Latrice Johnson, who I mentioned earlier, she's one of our facilitators with alongside another Amazon worker who's doing really great work. And they're bringing in like this new generation of workers that are now being, understanding about the civil rights movement, understanding about the labor movement, the big strikes of the 30s, and we're kind of like, for example, a lot of people in the civil rights movement, they think about Rosa Parks and how, she sat down on the bus and stuff. People don't realize that there were a lot of people at the time sitting on buses. This was like an organizing tactic. And when we go through that with a lot of these workers that just know about Rosa Parks, they're blown away. They're like, wait a minute, wait, what? Who is Claudette? So we go into all of that and how it's an organizing tactic and also through the labor movement. And we give them a little bit of all of that. So, like these movements just didn't create themselves out of thin air here. This is people have been organizing for decades. And when these workers who are just now learning about this stuff, it blows their minds. And I love watching them like get so into it. And then we'll go into role plays and actually, have them go through the conversations that they would be having on the job. And it's amazing. It's just amazing to see them struggle in the beginning. Some of them are naturals and don't even realize it. And this one kid, first role play, almost put me in tears. I mean, I think we can all attest here that it's easy for me to shed some tears, but because his story was so similar to mine, and he just told it, and it really like impacted me. And I'm looking at the other guy. The other guy didn't even know what to do after that, and he's like, "Yes, I'm in." I'm like, "Of course you are. There's no way you're saying no to that." But yes, I think, again, man, when we're feeling beat up and down, we keep creating new ways to reinvigorate us, right? And re-inspire us. I mean, it could even be something silly. Like my father, when I was a kid, took me to go see Superman films, right? The first, like Christopher Reeve was my Superman, right? And I'm like watching this stuff as a kid, and it was like the first time you see somebody can pick up a bus and throw it. Like I'm like, whoa, this is and I really like Superman. I like the comics. He was like an alien from another planet that decided to come here and use his powers for good. I know it sounds a little weird, but technically, he's an immigrant, right? And he's got all these abilities and he's not robbing. He could rob banks and be rich, he could be Bezos, but no, he's a mild-mannered reporter and he's just using that to get the story so he could help people. So I always thought that was really cool. And I remember being, and again, this may be silly to people, but these are the little things that inspire me. I'm like beat up one day in the shower again, like, oh, all of my feelings, like, how could Amazon do this? They fired like, I don't know how many workers again, and it's so frustrating that they can do it. And I come out of the shower, I look in the mirror, and out of nowhere pops this little Superman curl. And I'm just looking at myself and I'm like, dude, you're Superman. Do not let them beat you. And in that moment, that right there, just that little pep talk to myself, that little curl that popped out just changed my day. And then I was ready to take on the world. You know what I mean? So little things like that, as silly as they are, they can be something that's yours. You know what I mean? Something that from your childhood, that can affect you later on, and you're just like, whoa, this just helped me in such a weird way, But again, I'm always going to go back to the support system, those organizations that do great work. Yeah, I definitely, and listen, I know not all of us have, the best family. Some of us grow up with families that can be, very conservative, or, we don't agree with them politically. And sometimes but if you do have a member of the family that you, as from a kid, grew up with, like I said, I have I have my mom, I have my brother. So like, there's family too. Like, don't forget about family. Some family can be really helpful if you have it. Obviously, not all of us do. If not, then there's the family that you've built around you, right? Because you don't have to be blood to be family, right? The workers that I build with, they're my family. So I think that first of all, family is not just blood, and you have a big support system of people that believe in you, and you should believe in them. And I think that back and forth is what makes it. Don't think because you're 52 years old and you've been through it all and experienced almost everything that you know it all. I could promise you, you don't. I could promise you, you don't. And a young person will teach you something, and an older person will show you something and teach you something. So don't ever, think you know it all, because there's always someone that's going to help you in a when you're in a bad way, if that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And I really appreciate that from both of you, really talking about the ways you're using like connection with other people to address burnout. Because I will be honest for myself, and I think people who kind of know me, this might surprise them, but people who really know me are like, yeah, that's classic Danielle. But when I'm going through something difficult or I'm upset, like my first instinct is really to isolate myself. I'm like, well, I'm not myself. I'm dealing with this thing. I need to get myself away from people so they don't see that I'm dealing with this thing. And that always makes it worse. That always makes me feel worse. So I'm curious. I am wondering, like, how might you guys respond to people who might want to prescribe a more like self-carry modern therapy solution, along the lines of advice of like, well, you can just simply disengage and tune out the noise, protect your boundaries, etc., stuff like that. Like, what would sort of your response to that kind of instinct be?
I mean, yeah, you can't get through it on your own. Yes, you have to take care of yourself, and if you need to like take the time, I really do think people do need to take responsibility for their own mental health and take care of themselves. But at the same time, in more, we found that the sustenance is our relationships. And so some things we've done in the caucus is like we've moved in the past year or so, we've moved a lot of our meetings in person so that we can really connect with each other. We have food, we have childcare, and yes, we talk about the issues and the work, but we really try to create space for people to connect with each other. And that creates those sustaining connections when it gets hard. We don't have to close in on ourselves. So we have people that we're constantly in touch with, that we can constantly talk through our day, our experience, our questions. So it's not about avoiding or numbing or closing in on yourself. It's actually about leaning into the hard stuff in relation with other people.
I agree with definitely a lot of what Sarah said there. I don't think it's also like a one size fits all kind of thing, right? I think it also depends on the emotions that you're feeling at the time. Like I'll go a little deeper and say, like if I'm angry and I don't think speaking to anybody at that point would be helpful just because I'm so angry, I will go to the gym and I will work out or I will go into the yard and start doing push-ups. I will do something that I feel is going to benefit my body and release some of that aggression and anger because what I'm up against personally is a very powerful corporation. It's Amazon and they have a way of making me so angry that I feel like things I can say may be not what I really want to say because I'm not thinking because of the anger in me and I know that at that point I have to kind of release some of that on my own before I can talk to somebody. For me, again, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing, but when I'm really super angry, I'm going to take that time to myself. I'm going to find a way to release it, and I'm going to do something that's going to benefit me physically because I know I can release the anger doing push ups, doing pull ups, doing sit ups, punching a bag, and thinking of Bezos while I'm doing it, which feels really good. I can promise you guys, if you're up against somebody or somebody that makes you angry, I don't always recommend this kind of medication, but if it's a CEO like Bezos, then yes, I do recommend it. Totally punch him. If it's an organizer you're having a problem with or somebody you're trying to organize, not so much. Because you got to find a way to get through together. You have to. Don't want to punch that person in the face. Not cool. But if it's against the CEOs or even the president, Donald Trump, then feel free to put their face on a punching bag and hit it as much as you want. When I'm feeling moments of depression, I feel like, right, we're talking about community and we're talking about energy, right? I feel when I'm in a really depressed state, I don't want that energy to be around the people that I love, right? So in that emotion, when I'm feeling in that and I don't want to be around people because I'm worried that what I'm feeling is going to, for me, energy is like that. I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't know if it's because I'm a Pisces, but I feel like when somebody's angry, I can feel it like in my body. This person is angry. So when I'm feeling depressed, I feel like they can feel that from me. So I'll do things that I love to do, which is like if it's the summertime, I'm taking a walk on the beach. I love listening to the ocean, just laying out in the sun and feeling the rays. What you said, Danielle, about like self-care kind of stuff, it is important. You can't do this stuff on your own. You definitely have to have people in your corner and support, but there are moments that you do need to take for yourself, and you need to find out what that is for you. For me, it's a long walk on the beach. I'm Puerto Rican. I grew up on beaches. I love the beach. Plus, being a Pisces, a water sign, I just feel more comfortable by the ocean. And just the sound of the waves. It could be a late night walk with a moonlit water. Just listening to the sound of the ocean, it makes me at peace and it takes away some of that depression. And then it helps me think of ways to find forward. And then I can call somebody and have a conversation and we will try to work through it, because now I'm feeling at peace. and I'm not feeling that depression, that energy is going to be transforming into something else or into someone else. And yeah, or, I like nature. So it's not just the beach. Sometimes it's a little colder. Maybe it's the fall, the spring, or the winter. A nice little trip to a cabin in the woods. It's fairly decently priced. You can do those things. You put a fire on. I have a family. I have two children. We tell ghost stories with some s'mores. Family time means a lot to me because I sacrifice a lot of time from them. So when I'm with them, I make it special, and those moments for me, again, they make me feel like this is why I do what I do, for my family, so that my kids can grow up in a better world where corporations haven't taken over the world, because I'm going to fight and I'm going to teach my kids that if they're going to want the things that I'm fighting for, this fight may not be over when I'm gone. They have to take on the mantle, hopefully, and both my children want to be organizers. Another quick story with Latrice Johnson. The first time we met, she couldn't really make our organizing meeting because she had a young daughter. And we were like, well, I was like, well, one of our lead organizers, I told him, listen, why don't you tell her that I'm going to bring my son who's about her age, and we're going to have them at the meeting, and she'll be fine. And we'll have somebody pick her up and make it easy for her. And she agreed to come to the OC meeting. And she is now a leader in this movement. But it was because I took the time. My son went with her, organized with her in the corner. They played some video games together on their phones. I think it's Roblox or something like that. And Latrice had the greatest conversation with her coworkers. There was about 10 of us at the Dunkin' Donuts, and it was a beautiful thing. And now she's probably one of the most, strongest leaders in our movement. But yeah, it's family. There's so many. Again, that's why it's not a one size fits all type of thing. Always the support system. You need people in your corner, but when you need those moments to yourself, if you can find something to do when you're angry to help you release that aggression before you put that on other people, if you're depressed, if you have a place that you can go that you've thought of as a child, something that makes you feel good when you're walking there on your own, and it just brings you at peace, and then you can have those conversations. Again, those are things that are very helpful to me. I hope they're helpful for y'all.
I'm definitely adding getting a punching bag of Jeff Bezos to my self-care rotation. I agree, you can't really get through this stuff alone. But when I'm not quite ready for one-on-one time just yet, looking at weird antiques on Facebook Marketplace is a pretty great band-aid.
Yeah, or going to the movies on company time. Wait, who said that?
If anyone asks, it's a podcast prep meeting. Sarah, you did this workshop before in 2024. I'm curious what people thought. Did they find it cathartic and validating? I'm also curious if you've heard from anyone since then, too, about successfully implementing strategies they took from this workshop.
So, like I said, every time I have a question, I'm not sure what to do, I talk with my close gals, my comrades, who are also leaders and more. So even when I was preparing for this podcast, I was like, hey guys, remember when you were in that workshop that I was leading? What were your thoughts? So everything is communal. All questions can be worked through with other people, even if you're just getting ready for the Labor Notes podcast. But, in that workshop, we had, Tony was a panelist. There were a very, very few dry eyes in the house after Tony shared, especially talking about his family and the sustenance that he gets from spending time with those beloveds. And in the labor movement, we're up against a lot and we're working so hard. So having the space in that workshop to get real and vulnerable and speak from our heart about burnout, if we want to do this work for the long term, we have to have those vulnerable conversations. So it was really great to have people both see the panelists and hear the panelists, but also part of the workshop was the participants in the audience were talking to each other and connecting with each other. So we always try to build those connections, and we all came away inspired and ready to keep going.
Thank you both so much for being here today. That's our episode. Do you, the listeners, have a story about overcoming burnout with your coworkers? Little rituals or routines in your union that have kept you sane? Tell us about it at podcast@labornotes.org. And please rate us or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. If you're listening to us on Podbean at labornotespodcast.podbean.com, please download our episode.
The Labor Notes podcast is produced by Daniel Smith, Sindhu Sundar, and myself. Our title music was written and performed by our coworker, Keith Brower Brown. See you next week. Solidarity, y'all.